In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the tie rod adjusting sleeve on this Ford F250. This is the one that connects the two lower outer tie rods together. At the end of this job, you will need to get an alignment. Let's get started. Let's remove all 8 of the lug nuts. To remove the wheel, for me, I have to use a special socket since these are aftermarket lug nuts, but I believe a 21mm socket is the factory size for these, so just remove the lug nuts and then, like I said, pull the wheel off. Now with a pair of pliers or cutters, remove the cotter pin that holds the castle nut on here. We're going to have to either cut this or bend it. Sometimes they get stuck. Just going to cut this flush so I have less to pull through that stud. There we go, that's coming out. A lot of times they get stuck, and at that point you'll have to break them off and then drill it out. Hopefully yours does not get stuck. I have this little castle, locking castle nut on here that actually goes over the mounting nut, so remove that. If you have an actual castle nut, at this point you would put a socket directly on it. Use a 21mm socket, remove this mounting nut. I will put it back a few threads so that when I tap this knuckle to break the stud free, it doesn't just fall down all the way. It will be on here and held by this mounting nut. And speaking of hammering the knuckle, take a hammer and hit right here to push the stud out of the knuckle. Now that it's out, you can remove the nut the rest of the way and pull the tie rod out. Now loosen up the mounting nut that holds this clamp on here onto the outer tie rod. This is a 13mm socket. You might not have to remove this completely, but you have to loosen it up so it can let go so you can slide it forward, because this bar right here goes into the sleeve that we have to remove. Use a hammer and get this bolt out. Once you get that out, you should be able to pull this sleeve. I'm just going to pull it away over here. Similar setup over here, except this is just a sleeve that clamps on the threads here on the sleeve. So remove this 15mm mounting nut. Guess you don't have to completely remove it, but at least loosen it up. So this can now spread apart and let go of the threads that are in here. There we go. I put a lot of rust penetrant on this area here. If you have to use heat at this point, you can. This, in my case, is very rusty, but hopefully it does break free, and hopefully yours is not as rusty. I'm using a pipe wrench for this. If you have any other tool that will work, go ahead and do so, but you need some good leverage and a good bite on this area to actually spin this free. Count the amount of turns it takes when you remove this tie rod so we can put it back in the new sleeve the same amount of turns. There it is. Now on this side, let's do the same exact thing. Take the 15mm nut off of this clamp and then the 13 off of this one. And once again, same thing, we're gonna twist the sleeve and remove it off of this tie rod, but we will not be removing this end off of the knuckle. All right, that one's loose. Take off the little one. Gonna have to replace that. Sometimes this happens, these bolts break, but that's all right, I can replace it. I'm gonna move this out of the way, over here, take a hammer to this, and just make sure it's actually broken free. And now all we have to do is turn this sleeve. Keep in mind the other side is regular thread, this is reverse thread. So we're gonna have to spin this clockwise to loosen this up. I'm going to use that same pipe wrench, put it on the sleeve, and remove it. Also count the amount of turns on this one. Once again, we're going to have to put it back exactly where it was so we can get close to a decent alignment. Still need a professional alignment after this, but this will get you close. There it is. Next, I'm going to clean up these threads. They look okay, they just have a little bit of rust on them, so I'm not too worried about brushing them off, but I will rinse them off with brake parts cleaner to get the old rust penetrant grease and any other debris that's on here and get that all off. If you feel the need to, a wire brush will clean them up pretty nicely, unless they're extremely rusty, in which case either wire wheel them, or in the severe case, you can just replace the tie rod. I recommend using some anti-seize. If you don't have that, you could use a little bit of grease, but cover all the threads. That way they can not seize on in the future. And it'll also help a lot with the alignment because the threads will spin a little bit better and smoother when the alignment professional does their job. You don't need a lot of this, just need a thin coating. And of course I'm going to put it on the sleeve side as well before it goes on. Make sure you put it on the right way when you do, because it'll only thread on one way, and that is because this is reverse thread on this side. So if you can't get it started, you probably have it backwards. And now you want to spin it in the same amount of turns that it took to remove it, so you can get as close as possible to a good alignment. And right about there. Now we're going to use that same 15mm socket and tighten up this clamp. In this case, the mounting nut is on the back side, but that's fine. That doesn't change anything. You just want to make sure the opening is at the bottom, because if it's upside down like this, water will pool up here and make it rust out quicker. Try to center it up before you tighten it. There we go. I'll come back and torque this in a second. For now, we actually have to slide this through and then clamp this one on. Got myself a new carriage bolt for this, and I'm going to slide it through. The tie rod does have a little slot in it where this bolt is meant to go through, so just make sure you line that up, otherwise the bolt probably will not be able to clear the tie rod. Install the mounting nut and tighten it up. I'm holding mine with a pair of locking pliers just because it keeps spinning. This is not the original bolt that went in here, so the cutout on it isn't quite the same size. All right, that's tight. Now torque this clamp here to 41 foot-pounds. This is the 15mm headed mounting nut one, so it's bigger. That's it right there. And I said that because this one will torque to 15 foot-pounds. It's the smaller one, and if you torque it to 41, it'll probably break. That's it right there. Now let's put in the other tie rod. I already cleaned it and sprayed it with some anti-seize. This one is not reverse thread, so just spin it clockwise to tighten it up. And of course, count the amount of turns and put it in the same amount of turns. All right, that basically completes the amount of turns that I had. So let's bring this sleeve over. At this point, I'm going to put the tie rod back in the knuckle just so it stops flopping around and I can work a little bit better. Put the nut back on, snug it up. The torque for this is 85 foot-pounds. That's it right there. Put this cap back on. That allows you to lock everything in with the cotter pin. Slide in a new cotter pin. You don't want to reuse those. And once you poke it through, you don't want to bend it over to lock it in. go. Now let's tighten up this side. Make sure everything stays centered. Once again, 41 foot-pounds for this bigger bracket. Now get this little bolt through on the tie rod clamp. Put the mounting nut on. And let's tighten this up. There we go, 15 foot-pounds on this one too. So now this is all tight. Let's install the wheel. Let's get the wheel back on. Install all 8 of your lug nuts. Bottom them out in a cross pattern, and also in a cross pattern, torque them to 160 foot-pounds. Once again, 165 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. Double check them if you want. This time you don't have to go in a cross pattern. And there you have it.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.